Serge LeClerc is no stranger to 100 Huntley Street. There was a time several years ago when he actually represented Circle Square Ranches for a period of time. He has been on the program many times over the past 20 years or so. But at one time he was known as, and this is by the Mounties, as Canada's most dangerous criminal. He's written a book called Untwisted, From Lawbreaker to Lawmaker, which is a must-read. I referred to this book formally in the program some time ago, and we just felt that we need to bring Serge back. So welcome back, Serge.
Nice to be here.
Lawbreaker to Lawmaker, Canada's most dangerous criminal to member of the Legislative Assembly for Saskatchewan, with a special responsibility in corrections. The official title is?
Legislative Secretary, Corrections, Policing, Public Safety.
There you go. And Public Safety.
And Public Safety.
It's like Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And I may want to refer to your book occasionally here over the next few minutes, but really the point is this. We have a growing issue in some of the major urban areas in Canada. I'm thinking of Vancouver, I'm thinking of Toronto, and other cities, of course, with gangs. You spent 21 years behind bars. When you were out of prison from time to time, on parole, whatever, and before you went to prison, even as a teenager, you ran gangs.
I ran gangs.
You ran gangs. You understand gang culture. You're now in charge of really transforming so much of the culture of Saskatchewan through your governmental responsibilities. Talk to us about gangs.
Well, the gang epidemic is coast to coast to coast. And I've been privileged to be a major speaker for Crime Stoppers International and be brought down throughout North America to speak on the issues. A lot through the reserves because my mother was Cree and their gang problems. And so it's a phenomena that certainly has erupted violently in the last 15 to 20 years. As our culture in society has become more pressure-filled, more moving, children have lost the innocence of childhood. They have had that pressure put on to them. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among our young people. Number one killer of 21-year-old males is suicide. And so when we begin to look at the pressure that is on these young people for the suicide rate since 1985 to quadruple between the ages of 15 and 24, and from 1986 to now to drop down to 10-year-olds and triple. So when you begin to look at that rapid movement through commercialism, them being the number one generation with the high disposable income, being that pressure of technology, of money, of movement, has created an environment for kids to feel under attack, that they need to belong, that they're in a fractured society, they're in fractured homes, 50% divorce rate, and even when the homes are intact, the families are so busy with work, dual income, higher taxes, more money to make, to live up to the next door Smiths, and it goes on. So what we're looking at is a phenomena of the lack of identity. And when you have young people searching for identity, who am I? What is the meaning of who I am? What is my worth? What is the reality of my world and how do I fit into it? They are going to gravitate to the avenues that make it easy for them to have a reflected identity upon them, hence gangs. So when we begin to look at gangs, so many people think, oh, well, they're looking for family. Well, it's not family, it's identity. I have an identity within that unit. And when we begin to look at the reality of us as human beings, as creations of God, we were created with an identity, originally an identity that was interconnected with God the Father, with our Creator. And through time and through the era, and especially in this last 20 years of era, that identity has been wiped away by the humanist, left-wing, progressive humanist movement within our society. So now we have young people searching for identity. That innate kind of response that we want to belong, to believe in ourselves, to have a view of ourselves as having being of worth, of being liked, of being beautiful. All of those things that used to be with our identity in connection with God are no longer there for many of our young people, so they begin to search. Hence now we've got young people with the skater movement, with the gangster movement, the clothing, the goth, and they begin to gravitate towards an identity. Now, anytime you have that, you are going to have an identity that is going to be created that is going to be a rebellious identity, not a James Dean or maybe a James Dean plus. And in this culture today, it is so easy to almost be like that Clockwork Orange figure, to be so anti-establishment that you move into violence for the sake of violence, into graffiti, into drugs, into hedonism. And now we have this movement. Now you couple that with a lower socioeconomic class, with an alienation from the mainstream society, and you have the ideal conditions to begin to form these gangs that are now getting involved with organized crime, drug dealing, violence, drive-by shootings. That identity is now being formed as to being part of the Blood or the Crips or the Posse or whatever particular name of the gang is. Mad Cow Killers. I mean, if you go across Canada and the United States, there's a diversity of names.
Now, you used to lead one of Canada's leading organized crime families. Does organized crime see gangs as right picking for manipulation? Do they move in and influence gangs and use gangs for their purposes?
Absolutely. Now, when we begin to look at drugs is the easiest crime to do, drug dealing, because it's a supply and demand market, and we have high disposable income, middle-class kids who are the #1 customers for drugs, for ecstasy, for designer drugs, for marijuana, for hashish, crystal meth. Believe it or not, are from the middle class. That's our #1 market. The #1 movement into that market is the lower socioeconomic class, who use that as a vehicle to earn money because they're not going to earn it any other way, and they're not going to go to university or college. And so they're the front level entry movement for drugs. The suppliers, the outlaw motorcycle gangs, the crews like unfortunately I was, who are in it organized, who are the importers, are the manufacturers, begin to use these gangs to supply the youth in the high schools, the corner stores, the hoods, and they use it. They become the distribution frontline network. They become the retail liquor stores. They become the bars, in other words, for people to come to gather to drink, to get the drugs. So they hang out at the clubs, they hang out at the bars, they hang out in areas where the school kids, high school kids can come and buy and bring it back to the high school kids in the high school.